Rorik's eyes snapped open to the harsh glare of Terminus Station's artificial lighting filtering through his grimy window. His head pounded mercilessly, a souvenir from last night's celebration. Or was it self-medication? After 15 years of military service to the Earth Alliance, distinguishing between the two had become increasingly difficult. Outside his window, the lawless space station terminus continued its perpetual cycle of commerce and corruption. Freighters and smugglers' vessels docked and departed with minimal regulation, while the station's diverse inhabitants, humans, aliens, and various genetic hybrids, went about their business in the chaotic marketplace below. Rorik groaned, pushing himself upright on his cot. The room spun briefly, then settled into its familiar, depressing state, a 10 by 12 metal box with minimal amenities that he'd been calling home for the past 3 months. It wasn't much, but it provided anonymity, which was a valuable currency on Terminus. Computer time, he croaked, his throat parched. Local station time, 0947, the tinny voice responded. Too early, considering how late he'd been up negotiating with Skrell, the information broker whose intelligence had saved Rorik's life more than once during his final deployment. Last night's meeting had been tense, but ultimately productive, or so he thought. Rorik had provided Skrell with encrypted Alliance patrol schedules in exchange for. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts. Rorik froze. Years of combat training had honed his senses to detect the slightest anomalies. Someone else was in the room. In one fluid motion, he reached under his pillow for his pulse pistol and whirled toward the source of the sound. The weapon remained steady in his hand as he faced the intruder, but his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Standing motionless in the corner furthest from his bed was a woman. No, not a human woman. An alien female with skin the color of pale lavender, iridescent in the harsh light. Her eyes were large, slightly tilted upward at the corners, and entirely black except for pinpoints of silvery light that seemed to reflect the stars themselves. Her hair fell and waved past her shoulders, a deep indigo that shimmered with an almost metallic quality. She was undeniably beautiful, but what made Rorik's jaw clench was her attire. A minimalist ensemble of silvery material that revealed far more than it concealed, accentuating her humanoid yet distinctly alien form. Around her slender neck was a metallic collar with pulsing blue lights, and similar bands encircled her wrists. Restraints. Control devices. Slave gear. Who are you? Rorik demanded, keeping his weapon trained on her. How did you get in here? The alien woman lowered her gaze submissively. This one was delivered while you slept, she replied, her voice melodic with an accent he couldn't place. This one is called Lyra. This one is yours now. She tentatively raised her eyes to meet his, fear and resignation evident in her expression. Mine. Rorik repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. What the hell are you talking about? Wordlessly, Lyra indicated a small data pad on the room's single table. Rorik approached cautiously, never lowering his weapon or turning his back to her. He activated the pad with his free hand. A holographic message flickered to life, displaying the grinning, reptilian face of Skrell. Greetings, former Sergeant Rorik. Consider this a token of my esteem and the conclusion of our business arrangements. This Illyrian female is quite rare, one of the last of her kind, I'm told, and should fetch a handsome price if you choose to resell her. Or keep her for your personal use. She's been properly conditioned to serve. Either way, consider any debt between us settled. Enjoy your reward. The message ended, leaving Rorik staring at the blank pad, disgust churning in his stomach. He lowered his weapon slowly and turned back to Lyra, who had not moved from her corner. I don't own people, he said flatly. Lyra's expression flickered with confusion. This one was given to you. The transfer is legal within Terminus jurisdiction. I don't care what's legal in this cesspit, Rorik snapped, then immediately regretted his harsh tone when Lyra flinched. He sighed, holstering his weapon. What's your full name? Not just what they call you. Hesitation crossed her delicate features. Lyra Neverin, she answered, as if testing forgotten syllables. All right, Lyra Neverin, Rorik said, approaching her slowly. I'm going to remove that collar. Hold still. Panic flashed in her starlit eyes. No, the punishment. There won't be any punishment, Rorik said firmly, examining the collar. It was a standard suppression device, used throughout the frontier to control problematic servants and slaves. Barbaric, but simple enough to disable for someone with Alliance technical training. I'm not your owner, and you're not my property. As his fingers worked at the locking mechanism, Lyra trembled visibly. Skrell will be displeased. It is dangerous to refuse his gifts. Let me worry about Skrell, Rorik muttered, focusing on the collar circuits. After a tense minute, the device clicked and fell open. Lyra gasped as it clattered to the floor, her hand flying to her bare neck in disbelief. Rorik moved to the restraints on her wrists next, disabling them with similar efficiency. When the last one fell away, Lyra stared at him with an expression of confused wonder that quickly hardened into fear. You do not understand what you have done, she whispered. Probably not, Rorik agreed, stepping back to give her space. But I understand enough. No one should be collared like an animal. Lyra rubbed her wrists where the restraints had been. What will you do with this one, with me now? It was a good question, one Rorik hadn't fully considered in his rush to free her. First, we're going to visit Skrell. He needs to take you back and find you proper placement, maybe with the Refugee Relief Corps off station. Lyra shook her head slightly. Skrell will not take me back. Not alive. Before Rorik could respond, his room's communication panel chimed. With a suspicious glance at the device, he accepted the incoming call. Skrell's reptilian face appeared on the small screen. His lipless mouth pulled into what passed for a smile among his species. Ah, the soldier awakens. I trust you've had time to appreciate my generosity. This isn't generosity, Skrell. It's trafficking. I want no part of it. Skrell's vertical pupils narrowed. Such principled objections seem hypocritical from a man who provided classified Alliance patrol routes in exchange for information. Information that protected your former squad, if I recall correctly. Rorik's jaw tightened. That was different. Is it? We all trade in currencies we possess, Sergeant. I trade in information and, occasionally, rare commodities. His gaze shifted to Lyra, who had moved to stand behind Rorik. I see you've removed her restraints. Unwise. The Illyrian female is more valuable and dangerous than she appears. She's a person, not merchandise, Rorik insisted. Skrell made a dismissive gesture. Your Alliance sentimentality is noted. However, our transaction is complete. The female is legally yours on Terminus. What you do with her is your concern, but I strongly advise against allowing her to wander freely or attempting to return her to me. And if I insist, Skrell's expression hardened, then you would make enemies you cannot afford, Sergeant. There are others who would pay handsomely for an Illyrian, especially one with her unique qualities. My gift to you could be interpreted as protection. His voice lowered. Reject my generosity publicly, and I cannot guarantee that protection will continue for either of you. The screen went dark before Rorik could respond. He turned to find Lyra staring at him, her alien features unreadable. It seems we're stuck with each other, at least for now, he said grimly. Yes, she agreed softly. It seems we are both captives now. Rorik awakened the next morning to find Lyra sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring out the small viewport at the stars beyond Terminus. She wore one of his spare shirts, the oversized garment pooling around her slender form. She looked less alien and more vulnerable in the soft light. You didn't sleep? He asked, sitting up. Illyrians require less rest than humans, she replied without turning. Your floor was adequate. Rorik winced. He'd offered her the cot, but she had refused vehemently, insisting that such an arrangement was inappropriate. He'd eventually relented, providing her with what blankets he could spare. We need to get you proper clothes and supplies, he said, standing and stretching. I can't have you wear my shirts forever. This one, I have no currency, Lyra said, correcting her speech pattern with visible effort. I have enough credits for essentials, Rorik replied, though his account was dangerously low. Alliance pensions didn't stretch far on Terminus. We'll head to the market level after I clean up. The market level of Terminus Station was a cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells, not all of them pleasant. Countless vendor stalls lined the curved walkways, selling everything from exotic foodstuffs to questionable weaponry. The crowd was as diverse as the merchandise. Hulking Vordak mercenaries brushed past diminutive quill traders, while humans from various colony worlds haggled with insectoid Triskelion merchants. Rorik kept Lyra close, acutely aware of the attention she attracted. He'd found a hooded cloak to partially conceal her distinctive features, but her graceful movements and unusual height still drew curious glances. Without her slave restraints, she was just another alien visitor to most observers, but Rorik remained vigilant. Skrell's warning echoed. In his mind, they navigated through the throng toward a section specializing in clothing. Lyra moved with surprising confidence, considering her previous status. At a stall displaying fabrics from across the galactic arm, she paused, her fingers brushing against a shimmering material. "This is Ilarian weave," she murmured, surprise evident in her voice. I had not thought any remained. The vendor, a heavy-set human woman with elaborate facial implants, approached them eagerly. "The lady has an excellent eye. Genuine Ilarian shimmer silk, salvage from a pre-collapse settlement. Quite rare now, with their homeworld destroyed." Rorik watched Lyra's expression carefully. A flash of pain crossed her features before she composed herself. "It is lovely," she said simply, withdrawing her hand. "For you, a special price," the vendor continued, eyeing Lyra more carefully now. Her cybernetic eye whirred as it adjusted focus. "Are you? We'll take enough for a complete outfit," Rorik interrupted, placing himself slightly between Lyra and the suddenly too interested merchant. "And those durable synthetics as well, for everyday wear." After haggling briefly, they left with packages containing what Rorik hoped would be sufficient clothing for Lyra. They continued through the market, acquiring other necessities while Rorik monitored their surroundings for any unusual interest in them. At a food stall selling a variety of prepared dishes, Rorik purchased 2 bowls of a steaming grain mixture with unknown but appetizing spices. They found a relatively quiet corner to eat, beneath a viewport showing the constant traffic of ships arriving and departing Terminus. "Tell me about Ilarians," Rorik said as they ate. "I've encountered many species during my service, but never your kind." Lyra took a small bite before answering. "We were few even before the collapse. Our world, Ilara, was destroyed during the Hegemony Wars." She spoke with the detached tone of reciting historical facts rather than personal tragedy. Those who survived scattered throughout the frontier. Many, like myself, were collected by those who value rarities. Rorik nodded grimly. The Hegemony Wars had ended before his enlistment, but their aftermath had shaped the fractured political landscape of his entire military career. Countless worlds had been lost in the conflict, entire species reduced to refugee populations. "And your family?" he asked gently. Lyra's expression closed. It is not wise to speak of such things in public places. Before Rorik could press further, Lyra suddenly stiffened, her spoon halting halfway to her mouth. In a lightning-fast movement, she knocked Rorik's bowl from his hands, sending it clattering to the floor. "Hey, what the? Poison," she said quietly, indicating the spilled food with her eyes. "Neurotoxin extract from the Versian lotus. Odorless to humans, but detectable to Ilarians by its slight luminescence." Rorik stared at her, then at the vendor who had served them. The man was conspicuously absent from his stall. "How do you know this?" he demanded, pulling her up and away from the scattered food. "I was trained to detect many poisons," she answered, her voice still unnaturally calm. A valuable skill in an elite household's food taster. As they retreated from the area, Rorik caught sight of 2 figures detaching themselves from the crowd to follow them. A hulking Vordak and a slim human with distinctive scarring across his face. "We're being followed," he muttered, guiding Lyra toward a busier section of the market. "Stay close." They weaved through the crowds, taking abrupt turns and doubling back occasionally. Rorik's military training provided tactics for evasion, but the station's layout offered limited options. Eventually, They ducked into a maintenance corridor, pressing themselves against the wall as their pursuers passed by. "This is more than Skrell's usual surveillance," Rorik whispered when the footsteps had faded. "Someone else knows you're here." Lyra's luminous eyes met his in the dimly lit passage. "Yes, I warned you. Possession of an Ilarian invites danger." "I don't possess you," Rorik corrected automatically. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Yet you risk your life to protect me." A curious contradiction. They made their way back to Rorik's quarters through service corridors and less-traveled paths. Once inside, with the door securely locked, Rorik turned to Lyra with renewed determination. "No more evasions. Who's after you and why?" Lyra hesitated, then sank gracefully onto the edge of his cot. For a long moment, she said nothing, her alien eyes studying him as if assessing his worthiness for the truth. "I trust you," she finally said, sounding surprised at her own admission. "You freed me when you could have used me. You defend me when you could abandon me." She straightened her shoulders. "What do you know of Ilarian abilities?" "Only rumors," Rorik admitted. "Heightened senses, some kind of empathic awareness." "Those are merely surface traits," Lyra said. "The truth is more complex. Ilarians possess what your kind might call psychic abilities: telepathy, limited precognition, psychokinesis in some bloodlines. These abilities made us valuable allies during peacetime and dangerous enemies during war." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Was handmaiden to Princess Elera of House Neverin, one of the 7 royal houses of Ilera. When our world was targeted for destruction, the royal families attempted evacuation. Few succeeded. Our ship was captured by hegemony forces, and the survivors were distributed as spoils of war. "And the princess?" Rorik asked. Lyra's expression grew distant. "Dead along with most of my kind. I was deemed valuable for my trained abilities and sold to a succession of owners. Skrell acquired me recently from a collector who died under mysterious circumstances." Rorik processed this information, sensing there was more she wasn't telling him. "And what makes you particularly valuable to Skrell?" "Enough to use you as payment for critical intelligence." Lyra met his gaze directly. "I carry information, coordinates, security protocols, access codes, to a hidden Ilarian outpost where technology and resources from our civilization were secured before our world's destruction. The location exists in my memory, protected by psychic barriers that make extraction difficult without my cooperation." "That's what they're after," Rorik breathed, understanding dawning. "Not just you, but what's in your head." "Yes, Skrell believed that by giving me to you, a former Alliance soldier with known principles, he was placing me in a position where I would be protected yet accessible when needed." Her lips curved in a humorless smile. "He underestimated your honor and my desperation." Rorik paced the small room. "So we've got Skrell watching us, probably whoever else knows about this Ilarian cache hunting us, and the general dangers of Terminus to contend with." He ran a hand through his short hair. "We need to get off this station." "It will not be simple," Lyra warned. "The docking authorities answer to various criminal factions. No ship leaves without scrutiny." "I know," Rorik said grimly. "But we can't stay here. Terminus is too confined, too easy to monitor. We need a plan, resources, and a ship we can trust." "Trust is rare currency on Terminus," Lyra observed. "Then we'll have to be creative with our spending," Rorik replied, already mentally cataloging his limited assets and contacts. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start planning our escape." As Lyra arranged her blankets on the floor, she looked up at him with an unreadable expression. "Why do you help me, Rorik?" "You owe me nothing." Rorik considered the question seriously. "Maybe because after 15 years of following orders and serving Alliance interests, making my own choice feels right. Or maybe because nobody deserves to be treated like property." He met her gaze. "Or maybe I just don't like Skrell thinking he can manipulate me." Lyra nodded slowly. "Whatever your reasons, I am grateful." In the dim light of the room, with her alien features softened by shadows, she looked almost human. Almost, But the otherworldly beauty and ancient wisdom in her eyes reminded Rorik that she was something else entirely. Something equally vulnerable and powerful, familiar and utterly unknown. As he lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, Rorik wondered what he had gotten himself into and why, despite the danger, it felt like the most right thing he'd done in years. Over the next 3 days, Rorik and Lyra developed their escape plan. They established a routine, venturing out at different times each day to gather supplies and information while assessing security patterns around the docking bays. Lyra proved to be an invaluable ally. Her Ilarian senses allowed her to detect surveillance and danger with uncanny accuracy. More surprisingly, she demonstrated considerable technical knowledge, helping Rorik modify his outdated comm device to intercept docking control transmissions. "Where did you learn station systems?" Rorik asked as she deftly rewired the device in their quarters. "I have had many owners," she replied without looking up from her work. "Some valued intellectual skills alongside other services. I observed and learned when permitted." The casual way she referenced her captivity made Rorik's jaw clench, but he recognized the survival mechanism in her detachment. She had endured by adapting and absorbing knowledge wherever possible. By the third evening, they had identified their best opportunity. A mid-sized cargo hauler named Horizon's Reach scheduled for departure to the Free Haven colonies in 2 days. The ship's captain, a notoriously independent human woman named Velasado, was known for asking few questions if the price was right. "The problem remains payment," Rorik said, reviewing their assets. "We have enough credits for basic passage, but not enough to ensure her discretion." Lyra, dressed now in the practical synthetics they'd purchased, with touches of Ilarian shimmer silk at the collar and cuffs, sat cross-legged on the floor. "There's another option," she said hesitantly. "I could offer information as payment." "What kind of information?" "Nothing concerning the Ilarian cache," she clarified quickly. "But I possess knowledge of valuable trade routes and resource locations gathered during my time with various owners. Information a free trader would find useful." Rorik considered this. "Risky, but might work. We'll approach Sato tomorrow, feel out whether she's the type to sell us out to the highest bidder." That night, as they prepared for sleep in what had become their routine, Lyra broke pattern. Instead of arranging her blankets on the floor, she sat on the edge of Rorik's cot. "You have not asked about my abilities," she said softly. "Whether the rumors of Ilarian powers are true." Rorik sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I figured you'd tell me if it was relevant." She smiled faintly. "It is becoming relevant." She extended her hand, palm up. "May I show you?" After a moment's hesitation, Rorik placed his hand in hers. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, smooth with a subtle texture like finest suede. "Close your eyes," she instructed. When he complied, the sensation began, a gentle pressure against his consciousness, like a tide lapping at the shores of his mind. It wasn't invasive, merely present, waiting. "You may invite me in, or refuse," Lyra's voice came, both from beside him and somehow within his thoughts. Curious rather than afraid, Rorik mentally opened himself to the contact. Immediately, a rush of images and sensations flooded through him. The crystalline spires of an alien city gleaming under twin suns, the feel of Ilarian rain, warm and slightly effervescent against skin, the harmonious complexity of a language never meant for human vocal cords, and beneath it all, a profound sense of loss. Then, more immediate impressions. His own face, seen through her eyes when they first met, fearsome and yet somehow radiating a core of integrity that had given her hope. The wonder she felt at his unexpected kindness, the growing trust, and something else, something warm and tentative taking root between them. Rorik opened his eyes with a gasp, finding Lyra watching him intently. The connection faded, but didn't completely disappear. "That's how we communicate among ourselves," she explained. "More efficient than words." "It's incredible," Rorik managed, still processing the experience. "Are you reading my thoughts now?" "No. I established a connection to share my memories, not to invade yours. Without your specific invitation, Your thoughts remain private. She withdrew her hand, breaking the last threads of contact. But this ability is why Ilarians were valued as spies, negotiators, and companions. And why some fear us. Can all Ilarians do this? To varying degrees. Royal bloodlines, like House Neverin, possess the strongest abilities. She looked away. I was chosen as handmaiden to Princess Elora because our minds were unusually compatible, allowing me to shield her thoughts when necessary. Rorik sensed the deeper meaning in her words. You weren't just her handmaiden, were you? Lyra met his gaze again, a flash of defiance in her starlit eyes. I was her protector, her confidant, and eventually her bonded companion. When she died, part of me died as well. She touched her temple, but she left something behind, entrusted to me. The knowledge I carry was hers, the final hope of our people. The revelation hung between them, reshaping Rorik's understanding of Lyra's situation. Not just a slave with valuable information, but a guardian carrying the legacy of her people and her lost love. I'm sorry, he said simply. It has been 5 of your years, Lyra replied. The pain has transformed, and now there's a new purpose. She looked at him intently. I have shown you my truth. Will you still help me? Nothing's changed, Rorik assured her. We leave together. Lyra's relief was palpable. She reached out hesitantly, her fingertips brushing his cheek in a gesture so gentle it barely registered as physical touch. Thank you. That night, Rorik lay awake long after Lyra had settled on her makeshift bed, replaying the mental connection they had shared. The depth of her experiences, the complexity of her emotions. It humbled him. His own reasons for helping her seemed insufficient in comparison to what she carried. And beneath his strategic planning and protective instincts, he recognized a growing attachment that both concerned and invigorated him. Dangerous territory, especially now. The next morning, they set out to find Captain Sato. The Horizon's Reach was docked in Bay 17, a mid-tier berth that suggested its captain had moderate standing with Terminus authorities. Not a prime position, but not relegated to the shadowy secondary docks either. They approached cautiously, Rorik leading while Lyra kept slightly behind, her hood pulled forward to shadow her distinctive features. The ship itself was a Corvus-class hauler, showing signs of extensive modifications and years of service, but well-maintained where it counted. A stocky human man with extensive cybernetic enhancements was supervising the loading of cargo crates near the ship's main ramp. Looking for Captain Sato, Rorik stated, approaching with the casual confidence of a potential client. The man gave them a cursory once-over. Passenger or cargo? Bit of both, Rorik replied. Is she available? The crewman activated his comm implant with a twitch of his jaw. After a brief exchange, too subvocal to overhear, he nodded toward the ship. Up the ramp, first junction left, command deck. She's expecting you. Rorik exchanged a glance with Lyra, whose subtle nod indicated no immediate danger. They proceeded up the ramp into the ship's hold, then followed the indicated path to the command deck. Captain Sato was not what Rorik had expected. The stories painted her as a hard-bitten frontier smuggler, but the woman who looked up from a navigation console was barely into her 30s, with sharp features and an intricate pattern of glowing circuit-like implants tracing her shaved scalp. New passengers? She asked without preamble. Standard rate is 2,000 credits per berth to Freehaven, paid up front. No questions about your business. No guarantees beyond basic life support and arrival within 5 days. We're interested, Rorik said, but our situation requires additional discretion. Sato's augmented eyes flicked between them, lingering on Lyra's partially concealed features. Discretion costs extra. Significantly extra. We can offer information instead of additional credits. Lyra spoke up, lowering her hood slightly to reveal her Ilarian features. Sato's expression remained neutral, but her implants pulsed more rapidly. Interesting. What kind of information? Unregistered mineral deposits in the Cygnus Reach. Automated hegemony supply caches that were never recovered after the war. trade routes through the Veil Nebula that shave 3 days off the standard passage. Lyra listed each item calmly. The captain's interest was evident despite her poker face. And how did you come by this information? Does it matter if it's accurate? Rorik countered. It matters if it comes with unwanted complications, Sato replied pointedly. Like vengeful owners looking for escaped property. Lyra stiffened beside him, but Rorik remained steady. She's not property, and our complications are our own business. Sato studied them for a long moment, then gestured to 2 chairs opposite her console. Sit. Let's hear about this Veil Nebula route first. If it checks out against my charts, we can discuss passage terms. For the next hour, they negotiated. Lyra provided detailed navigational information that visibly impressed Sato, while Rorik handled the practical arrangements of their passage. Eventually, they reached an agreement. 3,000 credits total plus Lyra's information in exchange for secure passage to Freehaven and Sato's silence regarding their presence aboard. We depart tomorrow at 0600 station time. Sato informed them as they concluded. Be here by 0500 or we leave without you. Bring only what you can carry. And she fixed Rorik with a pointed look. Handle your complications before boarding my ship. I don't need trouble following us out of Terminus. Understood. Rorik agreed, knowing that handling complications likely meant ensuring no one was actively pursuing them at departure time. They left the horizon's reach with a tentative sense of progress, but Rorik's tactical mind was already processing their vulnerabilities. The 18 hours before departure represented their period of greatest risk. Enough time for word to spread about their plans despite Sato's discretion. We need a safe place to lay low until boarding time, he murmured as they navigated the docking area. My quarters are too obvious. I sense we are being observed, Lyra confirmed quietly. Not immediately threatened, but watched. Rorik considered their limited options. I know someone who might help. An old Alliance contact who retired to Terminus. He owes me a favor. They changed direction, heading toward the station's outer residential ring, where those with moderate means established more permanent homes. As they walked, Rorik noticed Lyra's increasing tension. What is it? He asked under his breath. The observation has become pursuit, she replied, her voice barely audible. 3 individuals, coordinating their movements to intersect with ours before we reach the residential section. Rorik casually surveyed their surroundings without breaking stride. The corridor ahead narrowed into a maintenance junction, a potential choke point. Beyond it lay more populated areas where confrontation would be riskier for pursuers. We need to reach that market junction beyond a narrow passage, he muttered. Stay close. They quickened their pace slightly, not enough to appear alarmed, but sufficient to reach the maintenance junction before their pursuers could cut them off. As they entered the narrow corridor, Rorik counted down silently, waiting for the moment. Now, Lyra whispered, her Illyrian senses detecting what human perception couldn't. Rorik spun, drawing his pulse pistol in a smooth motion as the first pursuer rounded the corner behind them. A lean humanoid with distinctive cranial ridges marking him as the Cien, a species known for tracking abilities. Behind him came the scarred human and Vordak they'd spotted earlier in the market. That's far enough, Rorik announced, weapon steady. We've no quarrel with you. The Cien smiled, revealing pointed teeth. The quarrel is not yours to decide, human. Our employer has interest in your Illyrian companion. Your employer can submit a formal request through proper channels, Rorik replied coldly. The scarred human laughed. Hear that, Nax? He wants proper channels on Terminus. His hand drifted toward a weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Hand over the alien female, soldier. You're outnumbered and outmatched. Rorik felt Lyra move slightly behind him, her hand touching the small of his back. Through even this minimal contact, he sensed her intention as clearly as if she'd spoken. Ready yourself. Last chance to walk away, Rorik warned, already knowing negotiation had failed. The Vordak stepped forward, his massive form filling the corridor as he unsheathed vibroclaws. Enough talk. Take him down. Secure the Illyrian. Several things happened simultaneously. Rorik fired his pulse pistol, catching the advancing Vordak in the shoulder. The scarred human drew his weapon, a neural disruptor, and Lyra, her eyes blazing with silver light, extended her hand with finger splayed. An invisible force slammed into their attackers, sending them sprawling backward. The neural disruptor discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. The Thaxian's head cracked against the metal wall with a sickening thud, leaving him dazed. "Run!" Lyra gasped, the effort of her psychokinetic blast clearly taxing. They sprinted through the maintenance junction and into the busier market sector beyond. Behind them, curses and scrambling sounds indicated their pursuers were recovering and giving chase. Rorik pulled Lyra into a side passage, then through a series of service corridors he'd mapped during his initial weeks on Terminus. They emerged in a different section of the station, momentarily clear of pursuit. "That was impressive," Rorik panted, checking Lyra for signs of strain. "Are you all right?" Unrefined use of ability, she managed between breaths. "Wasteful, but effective. You saved us," he corrected. "Now we need to disappear until our departure." Instead of continuing to his Alliance contact's residence, a location possibly compromised if they'd been under surveillance long enough, Rorik led them deeper into the station's maintenance sectors, areas rarely patrolled and known only to service crews and those with military backgrounds who understood station architecture. They navigated through narrow conduits and humming mechanical chambers until they reached a section that housed environmental control systems. The constant drone of air recyclers provided cover for conversation, while the warm machinery offered some comfort in the otherwise cold metal surroundings. "We'll rest here," Rorik decided, gesturing to a small alcove between two massive filtration units. "It's defensible with only one approach, and the ambient noise will mask our presence." Lyra sank gracefully to the floor, her breathing still slightly labored from their escape and her psychic exertion. "Our pursuers are not merely bounty hunters," she observed. "The Thaxians' tracking abilities, the coordination of their attack, they are professionals. Which means Skrell isn't the only one with interest in you," Rorik concluded, settling beside her with his back against the wall, pulse pistol within easy reach. "How many factions know about the Ilarian cache?" "Few with certainty," Lyra replied. "But rumors persist. The hegemony remnants, certain corporate interests with military contracts, perhaps elements within your Alliance intelligence division." She glanced at him. Princess Elara's final act was to scatter disinformation about the cache's location while embedding the true coordinates within my protected memories. Rorik processed this. "And Skrell, he knows you have this information?" "He suspects. The previous owner who acquired me was a collector of artifact from extinct or endangered species. When he obtained a genuine piece of Ilarian technology, I reacted in a way that revealed my connection to such things." Lyra's expression darkened. "He subjected me to various methods of extraction before his death." The implications made Rorik's jaw clench. "His mysterious death. Was that your doing?" Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Ilarians are not merely passive telepaths, Rorik. In extreme circumstances, our abilities can be weaponized against those who would harm us. It is not done lightly, and it exacts a terrible personal cost." The confession hung between them, neither accusation nor apology. Rorik considered how he might once have responded, with Alliance protocol, with military judgment, and found those reactions hollow against the reality of what she had endured. "We have 12 hours until departure," he said finally, accepting her revelation without condemnation. "We should rest in shifts. I'll take first watch." Lyra studied him, perhaps sensing through their growing psychic rapport that his view of her hadn't diminished. "I require less rest than you," she reminded him. "You also expended considerable energy with that telekinetic blast," he countered. "Rest first. That's an order." A slight smile touched her lips at his commanding tone. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, the formality softened by a new warmth in her voice. As Lyra curled on her side in the small alcove, Rorik maintained vigilance, his mind cataloging contingencies for their remaining time on Terminus. The horizon's reach represented their best chance at escape, but reaching it now presented a significant challenge. He was startled from his tactical planning when Lyra's hand found his in the dim light. She didn't speak or open her eyes, but through the contact came a gentle transmission of gratitude and something deeper, trust, perhaps, or the beginnings of affection. The connection lingered briefly before she withdrew, settling into restless sleep. Rorik stared at his hand in the half-light, still feeling the echo of her consciousness against his own. The sensation was foreign yet oddly familiar, as though his mind had been waiting to experience this communion without knowing it existed. Dangerous territory indeed, he thought, returning his attention to their security, but perhaps necessary territory as well. For hours later, they switched positions, with Lyra taking watch while Rorik attempted sleep. His combat-trained body surrendered quickly to exhaustion despite the uncomfortable surroundings. He woke to Lyra's hand on his shoulder, her touch light but urgent. "Someone approaches," she whispered, "not seeking us specifically, but conducting a systematic search of these sectors." Rorik was immediately alert, checking his weapon and gathering their meager supplies. "How close?" "2 junctions away, moving methodically. 3 individuals, different from our previous pursuers. They slipped from their hiding place, moving silently through the maintenance corridors in the opposite direction from the search party." Rorik noted that station time was approaching 0300, still several hours before their scheduled departure. "We need a more secure location," he muttered as they paused at an intersection, "and a way to reach Bay 17 undetected when the time comes." Lyra tilted her head slightly, her expression distant as she extended her senses. "There's a cargo transport system 1 level below us," she said after a moment. "Automated conveyors moving supplies throughout the station. They pass near the docking bays." "How do you know that?" Rorik asked, impressed. "I was transported that way when first brought to Terminus," she answered simply. "A common method for moving valuable cargo discreetly." The revelation was another reminder of how she had been treated, but Rorik pushed aside his anger as unproductive. "Can you find access to this system?" Lyra nodded, leading them to a maintenance hatch that opened to a service ladder. They descended to the lower level, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor lined with conveyor systems and sorting mechanisms. "These transport most non-perishable goods throughout the station," Lyra explained, examining the system. "Each conveyor has destination coding. We need one routed to the docking bay service areas." They followed the conveyor lines, checking designation markers until they found one labeled for the mid-tier docking section that included Bay 17. The conveyor belt was currently inactive, its schedule likely tied to station work shifts. "It will activate again approximately 1 hour before first shift," Lyra surmised. "Based on station patterns, that would be around 0500, precisely when we need to reach the ship." "Convenient timing," Rorik acknowledged. "But we still need somewhere secure until then." They found a maintenance closet near the conveyor system, cramped but defensible. Inside were cleaning drones and repair equipment, providing some cover if anyone glanced in. Rorik secured the door using a manual override technique from his Alliance training. In the confined space, they sat close together by necessity, shoulders touching in the dim emergency lighting. The hours until departure stretched before them, filled with tense silence, broken only by occasional whispered updates on their situation. "Why are you doing this?" Lyra asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. "You could have surrendered me at any point, claimed ignorance of my significance, returned to your life." Rorik considered the question seriously. "My life wasn't much to return to," he admitted. "Honorable discharge after 15 years. Most friends either dead or still serving, no family to speak of. Terminus was just somewhere to disappear while I figured out what came next." He paused. "Maybe you're what came next." The simplicity of his answer seemed to affect her deeply. Lyra's eyes, luminous in the dim light, searched his face. Among Illyrians, such commitment would suggest a bond forming. "Is that what this is?" Rorik asked, gesturing vaguely between them. "I don't know," she confessed. "My bond with Elora was formed over years, with ritual and purpose. This is..." Unexpected. Unplanned. Her lips curved slightly. Not unlike our current situation. Rorik found himself studying her alien features. The delicate sweep of her brow, the subtle iridescence of her skin, the starlit depth of her eyes, and recognizing the beauty there without reservation. Not human beauty, but something equally compelling and increasingly precious to him. If we survive this, he said quietly, we'll have time to figure it out. Lyra's hand found his again, a gesture becoming familiar between them. This time, no telepathic message accompanied the touch, just the simple comfort of contact in uncertain circumstances. They remained that way, a strange pair finding solace in each other's presence, until the subtle vibration of machinery coming to life alerted them that the conveyor system was activating. Station time, 0445. 15 minutes until their scheduled meeting with Captain Sato. It's time, Rorik said, checking his weapon one final time. They exited the maintenance closet cautiously, confirming the corridor remained empty. The conveyor system hummed steadily now, carrying various supply crates toward distant station sections. We'll need to time this carefully, Rorik said, examining the moving belt. Find a gap between crates large enough for both of us, jump on simultaneously, and stay flat to avoid detection by security sensors. Lyra nodded, her focus absolute as she watched the rhythm of the passing containers. After observing for nearly a minute, she pointed to an approaching gap. There, in 3, 2, 1. They moved in perfect synchronization, rolling onto the conveyor belt in the space between two large shipping containers. The belt moved at moderate speed, carrying them along with the station's morning supplies toward the docking bays. They lay flat, Rorik's arm protectively around Lyra as they passed through automated scanning checkpoints. The journey took approximately 10 minutes, carrying them through the station's internal logistics network until the conveyor began its approach to the docking bay service area. Preparing to disengage, Rorik whispered as they neared their destination. According to the routing indicators, they were approaching the service junction for bays 15 to 20. As they reached the appropriate section, they rolled off the conveyor into a receiving area currently unmanned during the shift change. From there, they navigated through service corridors until they reached an access point near Bay 17. Rorik checked the time, 0457. 3 minutes until their rendezvous with Captain Sato. He peered through the access port, surveying the docking bay. The Horizon's Reach stood ready for departure, its loading ramp still down as final cargo was secured. Captain Sato was visible near the base of the ramp, checking manifests with her cybernetic crewmen. More concerning were the two security officers positioned at the bay entrance, scanning arriving passengers and crew more thoroughly than standard procedure would dictate. "They're looking for us," Rorik muttered. Lyra followed his gaze. "Not standard station security," she observed. "Notice the modified scanners they're using. Those detect specific biosignatures, including Ilarian. Can you mask your signature somehow?" Rorik asked. Lyra considered this. "Temporarily, yes, but it requires significant concentration. I would appear human to casual scans, but detailed medical examination would reveal the truth. We just need to get past the checkpoint and onto the ship," Rorik said. "Sato's expecting us, and she has incentive to get us aboard without incident." They watched as a group of passengers approached the security checkpoint, a merchant family by their appearance, laden with personal belongings. The security officers processed them, efficiently but thoroughly before allowing them to proceed to the ship. "We'll approach with that final cargo delivery," Rorik decided, indicating where workers were preparing to move the last containers aboard. "Blend with their group, time our approach with their scanners occupied with the cargo." Lyra nodded, closing her eyes briefly to concentrate. A subtle ripple seemed to pass over her features. Nothing dramatic, but her alien characteristics became somehow less pronounced, the luminescent quality of her skin dimming to a more human pallor. "I am ready," she said, her voice sounding strained with the effort of maintaining the camouflage. They slipped from the service corridor and approached the loading area, adopting the purposeful stride of dock workers. Rorik had positioned his pulse pistol for easy access if needed, but hoped to avoid confrontation so close to their escape. Timing their move perfectly, they fell in alongside the cargo handlers just as the larger containers were being scanned. The security officer's attention focused on the readings from the substantial shipment, allowing Rorik and Lyra to pass with minimal scrutiny, their biosignatures partially masked by the cargo's own emissions. They had nearly reached the ramp when one of the officers called out, "You two, stop for verification." Rorik and Lyra exchanged a glance but continued walking, pretending not to hear. The officer called again, more insistently, and began moving toward them. "Almost there," Rorik muttered, seeing Captain Sato look up from her manifest, recognizing them with a slight narrowing of her eyes. The security officer reached for his sidearm. "Final warning. Stop for verification or... Is there a problem with my crew, officer?" Captain Sato's voice cut through the tension as she stepped forward, her authority evident in her stance. The officer hesitated. "These two didn't clear security scanning. They were cleared yesterday," Sato replied smoothly. "Last-minute additions to my manifest, authorized by dock control. The verification should be in your system." While the officer checked his datapad, Sato gave Rorik and Lyra an almost imperceptible nod toward the ship. They continued up the ramp without breaking stride, disappearing into the cargo hold just as the second officer joined the first. Inside, the cybernetic crewman directed them toward a small passenger compartment. "Captain says to secure yourselves immediately," he informed them tersely. "We're expediting departure." The passenger compartment was utilitarian. 4 acceleration couches, storage compartments, and basic amenities for the 5-day journey to Freehaven. They secured their few possessions and strapped themselves into the couches as the ship's engines began their warm-up sequence. Through the small viewport, Rorik could see the security officers still in discussion with Captain Sato, their postures becoming increasingly aggressive. One was speaking into a communicator, likely calling for backup. "They know," he said grimly. "Or at least suspect." Lyra released her camouflage with a visible shudder of relief. The effort of maintaining the disguise was becoming unsustainable, she admitted. They would have detected the fluctuations soon. The ship's intercom crackled. "All crew secure for immediate departure," Sato's voice commanded. "Override protocols engaged." The officers outside must have heard something similar through station channels, as they suddenly drew their weapons, shouting orders that couldn't be heard inside the ship. "She's bypassing standard departure clearance," Rorik realized with mixed alarm and admiration. "Going to catch hell from station control for this." The Horizon's reach shuddered as magnetic clamps disengaged prematurely. Outside, emergency lights began flashing as the unauthorized departure triggered station alerts. The security officers retreated from the strengthening engine wash as the ship began to lift. Through the viewport, they caught a final glimpse of the docking bay and of several figures rushing in, led by the distinctive shape of Skrell, his reptilian features contorted with rage as he watched his prize escaping. The ship lurched as it cleared the bay doors, immediately accelerating to combat the station's defensive systems, which would certainly be activating in response to their unauthorized departure. Captain Sato's voice came through the intercom again, tension evident beneath her professional tone. "Passengers secure for evasive maneuvers. We have pursuit craft launching." Rorik reached across the space between their couches, grasping Lyra's hand. The fear and exhilaration of their escape reflected in both their expressions, along with something new: hope. "Whatever happens," he said as the ship banked sharply, beginning its escape pattern, "we're free of Terminus." Lyra's fingers tightened around his. Together, she agreed, the single word carrying the weight of promise. The Horizon's reach shuddered again as it absorbed a glancing hit from station defenses, then surged forward with renewed speed. Beyond the viewport, the stars blurred as the ship prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, carrying them toward an uncertain future, but one they would face together, no longer captor and captive, but equals united by choice and growing affection. Terminus Station receded behind them, diminishing to a distant point of light among countless others. Ahead lay Free Haven, and beyond that, perhaps the hidden Alarian outpost with its ancient technologies and the hope of a scattered people. For Rorik, who had spent years following orders and fighting others' wars, and for Lyra, who had endured captivity and loss beyond measure, the journey represented something precious and unexpected, a new beginning. The ship shuddered one final time as it made the transition to FTL, and Terminus vanished from view completely. Whatever pursued them would need to wait until they reached normal space again, hours or days from now, depending on Captain Sato's evasion route. For now, at least, they had won their freedom. What would come next remained unwritten, but for the first time in many years, both the former soldier and the alien who had been a slave looked toward the future with something approaching joy. Not safety, not yet. Not certainty, perhaps never, but possibility. And in that moment, as their hands remained clasped across the space between them, possibility was enough.